Hello again. If anybody watched my first video, I'm Shannon. I started a vlog series, Maze Runner Mondays, yay, because I'm excited about the new movie Maze Runner, but it's based on a book, so I'm reading through it before the movie because even though the movie looks good, the book is always better, so I'm reading through it. I already did part one. Part one was really long. I'm going to try and, get this one down to the really important nitty-gritty details. So we're going to go ahead and start. When we left off, we had Thomas. He was the newest of like 50 to 60 boys or so, he thought, who were all in the Glade. And it's this big, green, nice place to live in the middle of a maze. But obviously it's not that nice if it's in the middle of a maze. But they've got, livestock and gardens and other stuff. So Thomas is kind of like all the other guys there, where he can't remember anything other than his name. There's nothing about his past, but in one of the last chapters, it seemed like this place felt familiar, and he wants to be one of the maze runners. That's the guys who run through the maze, which is where you get the title of the book, I'm sure. The maze closes at night, sealing in the Glade, which is actually kind of a good thing because there are grievers, which are these huge, maybe animal, maybe robot things that are like cow size, and you get really sick if they sting you, and your blood turns greenish, and it looks really painful and not good. Thomas was finally able to get a tour and start getting some questions answered, which was awesome because for a while nobody was answering any questions at all. And so he's getting his tour, but then an alarm goes off because apparently the box, which is the big metal elevator thing that he went up in, is coming back up, and the alarm means that it's a person, it's not supplies. But people normally only come up monthly, so this is an odd occurrence. So people are kind of freaked out and excited. They get to the box, and then all the guys are more freaked out and more excited because it's a girl. Yay, girls! Maybe, probably not. This probably isn't a good thing. Anyway, so they think the girl's dead at first, but then it turns out she's not. She wakes up for like a really quick second and says everything is going to change. Then she passes out again, but she has a piece of paper that she holds, and it says she's the last one ever. So we have a girl who's apparently the last one ever, meaning what I'm guessing is like the last of kids ever going into the Glade. Not just girls, because she'd also be the first and the last, so it's probably like all of them ever. So they have like the med jacks, which Thomas thinks are like the closest things that these guys have to doctors here. A couple of the guys in the back are basically being pigs, making comments about who gets her first, but hey, these are teenage boys with obviously no one there to, teach them how to respect ladies, so what do you expect? And even though Thomas doesn't think he knows her, she seems really familiar, and so he feels uneasy because all of this is really odd for the Glade, and he can't quite piece things together. Albie, he's kind of the leader guy, in case we forgot. Albie has Newt call a gathering, which, according to Chuck is the annoying guy who keeps trying to be Thomas's friend, but he's really annoying. I don't like him. Anyway, so Chuck says that calling a meeting for the Keepers gathering is only when something weird or terrible happens, which this would probably fall into the category of. Thomas tries talking to Chuck, saying he thinks that, someone evil put them there, and Chuck's like, yeah, just don't think about it, man, which I'm like, lame! Should call for an uprising! Get out of the maze, which probably wouldn't go well because they probably don't have enough know how to do it, which is why they keep trying to run through it and figure it out. Let's see. Thomas gets Chuck to explain what the runners do when they get maps, or they try drawing maps when they get back, so that they can remember the maze, and Chuck won't give him a ton of info. He's just like, yeah, just go ask the runners if you want, the info. But as Thomas keeps thinking about things, he poses an interesting question to Chuck, which is basically, maybe they're there as prisoners. Maybe they committed some kind of crime. Because you figure they're stuck in a maze, there are big monster things keeping them in, it closes at night, they have no memories, and Chuck's like, look, I'm probably like 12 or 13, what could have I done that would land me here in a place like this? Well, we'll get to it in a minute, but Chuck is creepy, so maybe he did. I don't know what, but he's creepy. So, Chapter 10, Thomas decides to go exploring, finish his tour on his own. He goes past the garden and the animal pens where they have the animals that they eat. He finds himself into the small wood section of the glade. He thinks he sees a beetle blade, which is this little mechanical animal thingy running off through the forest. He chases after it, and he ends up at the graveyard. And then when he gets there, he finds in one of the graves something that Chuck had told him about, which is half of a body, because apparently a glader tried to go back down the box hole after the elevator left and was sliced in half. So that's awkward and creepy. And so it's really quiet, but then all of a sudden Thomas gets attacked by Ben, the guy who was sick from being stung by a griever, and Ben attacks and bites him, which is scary. And on to chapter 11. So, chapter 11, Thomas is getting attacked. Albie's there. Albie tries to reason with Ben, but Ben's being all weird and saying Thomas is bad. And then he tells him, he's saying he's really, really bad. He's going to want to take us home. He'll want to get us out of the maze. Better we just throw ourselves off the cliff or jumped off the cliff. Better we tore each other's guts out. I mean, this is intense. So apparently the outside world is a fate worse than death to this guy, Ben. So maybe they're in a safe place instead of a prison, or Ben is nuts. Ben could be nuts. But he won't back off at all when Albie tells him to get off of Thomas. So Albie shoots him in the head with an arrow. So they have weapons in the glade. So Ben's dead, or we think he is. Thomas is trying to process all of this and realizes this has all happened just in the 24 hours that he's been in the glade. Later, when Thomas tries to sleep, Chuck, who is ever annoying, tells him, Ben flipping out after a griever sting is something normal. Other guys have done it before. That's not comforting. That doesn't help anything. And I concur with Thomas's next thought, which is Chuck has gone from mildly irritating to intolerable. I think that's really the case. The next day, Thomas is getting his first training session with a keeper. He's at the blood house, which is where they slaughter all the animals. Newt tries making conversation. I like Newt. Thomas decides he doesn't like the blood house. I don't blame him. He's heading outside. He sees a maze runner running out of the maze, and the runner collapses. He probably needs, like, Gatorade or something. On to chapter 12! So the collapsed runner actually seems pretty okay after Thomas calls over Albie. Minho, that's the name of the runner, bosses Albie around into getting him water, and then after Albie leaves, he's basically like, yeah, Albie's the leader if you want to call him that, but sort of, but not really. They have a really loose hierarchy system going on in this glade, I just have to say. All I can think of is Monty Python and that scene with the peasants and hearing in my head, running a maze is no basis for a system of government. Supreme executive power derives from a mandate from the masses, not from some prison-like farmland. That was my Monty Python. I'm going to get back to the book. So, Minho tries to be all tough with Thomas, but then says he's just teasing, so maybe everybody isn't as tough as Thomas thinks. When Albie gets back, though, Minho explains that he found a dead griever. On to chapter 13. James Dashner really, really likes cliffhanger chapter endings. Definitely. So, chapter 13. Albie starts asking a bunch of questions about the dead griever, like were its metal spikes out of its skin, and was its skin moist? And at this point, Thomas is thinking all the questions the reader is thinking, like, what? Metal spikes, moist skin, is this thing animal, is this thing mechanical? But he doesn't ask anything because he just wants them to keep talking about it. They decide that rather than going and getting the griever right now, they're going to wait until the next day to go ahead and get it. Thomas decides to just go chill for a while because this is all a lot to take in, especially because Albie basically tried accusing him, saying, well, not accusing him, but he's basically like, look, all this weirdness is happening. You came, then a day later, instead of a month later, another newbie came, and then that newbie was a girl, and then Ben tried to bite you, and now we have a dead griever, and it can't be all coincidence. So, which is fair. So Albie makes him promise that if he, sees or thinks of anything weird or remembers anything, he'll tell them, which, again, I think that's fair. Secret telling goes both ways. So Thomas decides to chill for a while. Who ruins his chill time again? It's Chuck. However, Chuck is letting him know very intense, exciting news. Ben, who was shot with the arrow in the head, isn't dead. Arrow missed his brain, so the Medjacks patched him up, and he's in the Slammer, which is basically their prison. And Chuck is basically like, yeah, but the guy's really going to wish he was dead, because they're decided they're going to banish him. And Thomas is like, what's that about? What do you mean banish him? You know, because it's apparently worse than death. And this is where it gets, like, kind of creepy and kind of dark, and part of why I still don't like Chuck anymore. Let me read it. And then, Thomas saw perhaps the most disturbing thing he'd seen since he'd arrived at the glade. Chuck didn't answer. He only smiled. Despite it all, despite the sinister sound of what he'd just announced. Then he turned and ran, maybe to tell someone else the exciting news. So apparently it's both very bad and very exciting that someone's being banished, but I think Chuck is just plain creepy. My dislike of Chuck is way up there now. It was like a 5 because he was annoying, but now it's like a 9. So I really hope Thomas finds new friends, because Chuck is not a good one. That evening-ish, they all meet out at the east door of the maze. They bring Ben out. They're, like, dragging the guy because he doesn't want to go anywhere. And Albie asks for a pole, which Newt brings. It's, like, 20 feet long, and it has a collar. This is where it really seems like it's getting dark. Not just in the book, because it's darker, but, like, dark. On to chapter 14, because, again, cliffhanger chapters. Ben tries pleading. He, blames his actions on the changing, and then Albie speaks. It's all kind of ceremonial, because Albie's just like, Ben of the Builders, you've been sentenced to banishment for the attempted murder of Thomas the Newbie. The keepers have spoken, and their word ain't changin', and you ain't coming back ever. And there's a long pause. Keepers, take your place on the banishment pole. So that's, like I said, ceremonial. There's an order to things. So all of the keepers basically go along the banishment pole. They're holding it. Ben keeps trying to plead. He keeps trying to turn around. Thomas thinks he feels responsible, but he doesn't know why. And then all the keepers push him out into the maze right before the doors close, and he's banished. And that's the end of chapter 14, which is the end of my 7 chapters for this week of The Maze Runner. We'll have 7 more in a week as we try and figure out what's going on. Not much. Weird stuff's happening. I don't know if it's Thomas's fault or if Thomas is just a part of it. I gotta be honest though, I actually like the rules that they have set up in the Glade. I don't necessarily like the banishment of a teenage boy for attempted murder if he was a little delirious, but you know, it seems like it would be either that or anarchy in a place with teenage boys and no adults. No offense to teenage boys, but, you know, I'm surprised they're all running things as well as they are. So, yeah, that's about it. Thank you very much for watching. Please leave a comment below. No spoilers. And yeah, thanks. Bye.